All right, having spent some time with the Twin Otter, both my own and my friend Steve's, I was able to learn a few things along the way, and I kind of want to share some of those little tips and tricks of some things that I have learned on the airframe that I think could definitely help you guys out. These are not necessary, they're not mandatory, they're just things that I have learned that says, you know what, maybe there's some others that could benefit from this as well. During the assembly process, one of the things that I like to do, if it's a tricycle landing gear, and since I operate off of not that the most perfect grass field in the world, especially one of our fields, the east-west runway's got a lot of little potholes in it that could definitely be a problem for a tricycle landing gear. But even on our main runway, there are some chipmunk holes, things in that nature that, and it's not putting green smooth by any means. So you know that there's going to be a lot of stress that's going to be put on the front landing gear. And this is something I learned back when I had my my Cherokees, which I still have, of course. And this is a trick I had learned from those airplanes: is put a servo saver on the push rod that goes to the nose wheel. And what a servo saver is, it's a Dubro product. It's got little springs on it. And all it's trying to do is it sits on the push rod, and any shock loading that comes through the nose wheel, is it tries to push the push rod back into the servo arm, and then of course try to twist the servo arm and the servo gears. It has springs on it that help just absorb some of that shock loading, and so you're really just helping to protect the servo and the servo gears from some of that torque loading that comes from the front landing gear. And I think it's like $2 or $3, something like that, for a servo saver. It just takes a few minutes to install in the airplane, and it's really cheap insurance is all it is. I've been out running that on the other Twin Otter that we've been playing with. Both my Cherokees have it. So any tricycle landing gear airplane, one of the first things I do is I order the servo saver, and you can get it right from Horizon Hobby. And you install that on the nose wheel push rod, and all you're trying to do is just try to protect the servo itself. The other thing I like to do for a tricycle landing gear airplane, and once again, this is not a must-have or you should do this. This is just something I like to do, and if you want to follow my advice, you are more than welcome to. And that is to upgrade the rudder nose wheel servo to a metal gear version. I use the Spectrum metal gear reverse servo that is used on the E-Flite Viper, and the Twin Otter of course uses reverse servo, so make sure you look at that before you order your servos to know if they're standard rotation or reverse rotation. And looking at the parts manual, these are the reverse rotation, so you just simply go to the Horizon website, you look up the E-Flite Viper, scroll down through the parts list, and you will find the metal gear servos. So I have been using those in a number of airplanes now, and of course what I love about them is they're the same size as the factory servos, so they just simply drop right in. You don't have to modify or cut or tweak anything, they simply drop right in. And they also come with some new fasteners as well, and the screws that hold the servo down to the balsa wood floor in here have a little bit of a larger flange head on it, so you're able to kind of distribute some more of that clamp load down on the servo. So I upgraded the screws as well. While I was at it, I also did the elevator servo as well, and a lot of that has to do with just the fact that when you load the airplane back and forth, it's so easy to sometimes bump one of these control surfaces, and we know that shock loading is just not good for the gears and for the servo. So by you upgrading to a metal gear servo and using the servo saver, you really just help making the airplane just a little bit more robust. If you fly off of either really smooth grass or fly off pavement or a really smooth surface, or if you're just an outstanding pilot and you can grease every single landing, then I wouldn't bother with any of this stuff. But for me, knowing how my landings are in the field I'm operating at, these are just some cheap things that you can do to help try to make the airplane just a little bit more robust. And speaking of robust, one of the other things I did is when I went to go install the main landing gear here, which sits underneath this foam panel, there's a balsa wood floor in there, and I actually used I just used some clear Gorilla Tape, and I laminated that balsa wood floor before screwing that the landing gear down. And all I'm really trying to do there is just try to kind of give some additional surface tension there by having the adhesive surface on there. I'm trying to really just strengthen that floor up, knowing that these main landing gear are probably going to take a little bit of beating, and of course the floats go on there as well. And so if you're operating off water, you want to make sure that that area is pretty robust, and you try to kind of distribute the loads out the best you can. Is there really things that really, like I said, they're not necessary, but if you plan to fly your airplanes for a long time like I do, I believe in taking great care of them and making them just a little bit more robust, because for me, I'm going to have this thing for a very long period of time, and I want to make sure that it continues to operate at the best that it can. And so I'm just kind of making sure that I'm doing everything I can to help extend the life of the airplane. Some people have no problem with buying a foam plane, flying it, crashing it, throw it in the trash, buying another one, and keep going with that. I'm a little different than that. I try to keep my planes going as long as possible and keep them looking as beautiful as possible. Which brings me to my very last thing to do. I haven't done it on this one yet. I did it on Steve's that we had in a previous video, and that is to seal the airplane with some clear coat. I use the Varathane exterior high gloss, and I'll go ahead and coat the entire aircraft with that. And it makes it a little bit easier to clean. It also gives it a little bit more of a shine. The Twin Otter comes from the factory with a lot more shine than you would expect right out of the box, but I like to kind of just give that a little bit extra shine to it to kind of make it a little bit nicer. And it also helps with hanger rash too. It kind of gives you a little bit of a protective barrier. The big thing there is, remember, is when you are done with all these improvements, so let's say you laminate the floor, you put in metal gear servos, and you clear coat everything, and you do all that work, make sure you recheck your center of gravity. You'd be surprised. There's a lot of surface area back here, and just like any other airplane, you add a clear coat to all this surface, you are going to shift the center of gravity. So while you may have set it up out of the box with one location, you start adding metal gear servos and tape and decals and paint and all this type of stuff to it, you'd be surprised. You'll actually alter the center of gravity. So make sure you check that when you get done with that work before you go and fly it. But really, this airplane doesn't need anything. These are just things that I like to do to kind of extend the life of the airplane out. From flying the other one, we realized that it's a fantastic flying plane, and it really doesn't need much at all. The improvements I made on this took very little time at all and cost very little money. So if you're interested in keeping your model and want to keep flying and you're operating off a rough field, these are definitely things that you could look at doing to keep the airplane going. So if you guys got any questions, by all means, I'll leave them in the comments below, and I'll be more than happy to assist.